Thank you for all being here today. We have Mr. D. Raja, National Secretary of the Communist Party of India, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Senior Fellow at the Center for Policy Research, Professor Abhijit Sen, who has just retired as a Professor of Economics at the Center for Economic Studies and Planning School of Social Sciences at JNU, Mr. Mukesh Butani, Non-Executive Chairman of BMR Advisors and Managing Partner of BMR Legal, Mr. Suman Sinha, Chairman and CEO of Renew Power, and Mr. Harsh Mandir, Director of the Center for Equity Studies. Thank you so much for coming for the Business Today pre-budget panel discussion. Let me start with the first question. There seems to be a fair amount of gloom and doom of late about the economy, with many of the numbers being cited as having turned quite bad. The mid-year review scaled down the economic expectations from the beginning of the year. Globally also there seems to be a lot of gloom and doom with China and other problems in Europe and stuff. How bad is the situation? Are we overreacting? Is it really bad? Should we start from Mr. Raja?
It's not encouraging. Recently I have come across the report that Credit Suisse Global Wealth Report. It is quite alarming. As far as India is concerned, that report shows the Indian economic growth for the past 15 years. It has largely benefited 1% of the richest in this country. A total wealth, the report says, of $2.3 trillion was created in Indian economy between the years 2000 and 2015. Out of this newly created wealth, the top 1% appropriated 61%, while the next 9% got 21% share. The bottom 90% of the people was left with only 18% of this new wealth. So does it require a review of the policies or not?
Do we have money? Does the government have money for growth at all? And do we have the growth at all?
Yeah, so it's a great question because I think, going by the statistics, during the media review and all the GDP first half statistics, which is sort of telling us that we are growing at 7.5%, the doom and gloom should be completely misplaced. But the fact is that for the first time, I think in our history, our statistics are not reflecting the ground reality. And I recently heard a very senior official of the Department of Economic Affairs in a closed-door conversation who was saying that this 7.5 reflects more like 5.5. This serious issue that there needs to be a rectification and a clarification of what this new series means in terms of the old numbers and where we are. Because otherwise, India had a reputation for very kosher statistics. That's being shot. And I think if the government doesn't take very serious steps in terms of appointing an expert group with external experts, even outside experts, to tell us as to where we are today and what's the rate of growth of the economy that we might. That's, I think, the first thing that, as far as I'm concerned, the finance minister should announce. Second point is that given what I know and what I can see, it's clearly that the ground realities are not very good at all. And especially there, I think the two sectors, three things that I need to point out is that manufacturing is in very bad shape at the moment. And there is 30% more excess capacity. There are some sectors like steel and textile, which are nearly comatose. They are scared of the imports that are going to happen. There are bankruptcies on the offing. People are not, So I think manufacturing, somebody takes solace in the fact that if you take a 3-month moving average, then April to November number is 3.7%, which is slightly better than 2.7 or 3.2 last year. 3.7% was the rate of growth of manufacturing was a Make in India initiative, planning to raise the share of manufacturing to 25%. This is going to cause a lot of problem. And the third, of course, is that the private corporate investment just refuses to grow. That rate is down like I think to 2.5% or 3.2%. At the peak, it used to be something like, if I remember, and somebody would correct me on that, it was more like 14% rate of growth. The fact remains that it is today 8% growth, while in 2007, I remember it was 23%. My overall assessment at the moment of the economy is that this government's got a lot of work in progress. There's a lot of things that are going on which I'm aware of. These things will take time to, I think, materialize. Some leading indicators are now positive. For example, the first time after about 27 months, the heavy commercial vehicles, the growth is beginning to move. It's a very important leading indicator. Tractors growth, by the way, is still down. Automobiles have got the 5th month of improvement in their sales. The airline traffic had the best month in November, 27% growth. I think the rail traffic is also beginning to improve. So these are some leading indicators which show that a minor recovery is on, but the private investment is very shy, and I think we'll have to take very active steps which we should discuss in what the budget should do.
Professor Sen, your views?
Really nothing much has changed. There are some new areas of concern. So new areas of concern have been also building up. The first is, I think one of the things which has happened over the last 15 or it's actually happened over the last 25 years is that people don't quite realize how dependent we are on the world economy. And I think since 2008, we have somehow been saying that the world economy might go to hell, we are going to somehow bounce back out of it. And I think the picture of this decline in exports, I think brings home, just as the way our stock market behavior depends on international stock markets, but the decline in exports brings home that unless you actually start realizing what world you are living in, there is very little that you can do about growth in general. I think that's point number one.
Interject one point here. What I had also asked was that how bad is the global economy and how is it going to affect us? So,
global economy, with the solitary exception of the United States of America, is in real, it's about as bad as it was in 2008. The only difference is the United States, but because of the big number that it carries, the world economy looks much better than it did in 2008. Okay? And that's really the forecast for 2016, that the US economy will somehow remain roughly where it is, and there is absolutely no chance that China or Europe, the other two big ones, or Japan, Japan's in any case been in doldrums for a very long time, are going to actually do very much. So expect on the international economy side a continuation of 2015, and which is not a good story.
Mukesh, you have been meeting more corporates than almost any of us, I think. What is your view?
I think there's lots happening at the ground level, in order for us to be able to propel growth and attract more investment. We can always sit and debate whether that is good enough. Should the government have done more to attract institutional investments? Should the government have done more to attract FDI? Should the government have done more to raise the level of confidence of Indian entrepreneurs? So a case in point is, as advisors, I certainly feel that in the month of July and August, when the bogey of the levy of minimum alternate tax on FIIs came up, I think FIIs were extremely nervous about it, and the FIIs started questioning, is the new government now going back, on its promises of stability in tax policies. So there was a solution for that. I think the government acted very fast. There was political will, and I think, things do seem to fall in place.
Mr. Bandar.
The first and most important is job creation. I think we need to remember that we have every second Indian is below the age of 25. A million new young people are joining the workforce every single month, and they have dreams and they have aspirations. We have very poor levels of education. We might keep talking about skill development. They're not ready for the market, but the market is also not creating jobs. And I think that my first worry is that we haven't acknowledged that even in the high noon of economic growth, the years 2004 to 2010. The total number of jobs that were created was about 3 million. The number of people who joined the workforce in those years was about 57 million. And most of those jobs were created in the lowest end of casualized, home-based work, not in the formal sector at all. And to say that more of the same, without any sort of fundamental understanding of why the kind of economic growth that we are pursuing is not generating jobs, it's not being addressed, and I think that's to my mind my first worry. The second is the complete, almost terminal crisis that Indian agriculture is in, which we are not, which we are just not addressing. It's just getting worse and worse, and I think we are in a state of considerable denial about the consequences. And these 3 years of drought have made things worse.
There has been high growth in the past. Even now, if you do believe the statistics, we are not too badly off. World Bank thinks that we are the fastest growing major economy at the moment. The fact is that if you take the population into account, is a 7.5%, 8% even, is it enough given the sheer population? Because, you could keep growing and your GDP could become...
7.5% is very good. That's
very good.
Per capita income of 6%. You will double per capita incomes in less than 13 years.
GDP rate is quite important, I agree. But finally, how it corresponds to the living of the people, that is more important. If that doesn't correspond to the living of the people, no use of talking about GDP 7% or 8%, even we can move to double digit, all these things. Then one issue which Arsha has raised, this agriculture, and there is a serious concern, and people are demanding Parliament should have a special session to discuss agrarian economy, agriculture, that is, and even there is a demand that there should be a separate budget for agriculture. The point is, agriculture is in deep crisis. Farmers are passing through unprecedented distress. They are committing suicide. Many parts of the country are in the grip of severe drought. And if we do not multiply our investments in agriculture, that is going to be a real challenge for the government.
There is a lot of gloom and doom. What, in your view, is at the moment the real economic position? How bad are we off? You run a business, you run a consultancy, sir.
Yeah, so look, I think the very question that you asked is a little bit sort of leading to its own conclusion. Is there doom and gloom? Obviously implies that there is doom and gloom, otherwise you would not be asking me that question. Two things. Number one, the number by itself, the headline number, in any other year, we would have taken it happily, right? 7.5, 8, we would have taken it happily. And certainly in the context of what's happening in the world today, we should be very happy with these numbers, right? But, so that's the puzzling part as to why then are we having this discussion. I think the issue, however, is that when you actually look at what's happening around you, it is not borne out by actual activity, economic activity around us. And, Rajiv talked in great detail about various numbers and so on. And just in anecdotal discussions that I have with fellow people from industry, across different parts of Indian industry, nobody seems to be saying that there is growth happening, right? The best feedback that you get is that, yes, things seem to have bottomed out right now. Okay. And so therefore, but nobody really is witnessing this increased growth, right? So it's a bit of a mystery to me, and I think to a lot of people, as to where the 7.5% is actually coming from.
What do you really feel is the kind of budget that we are likely to get? Is it going to be actually a bite the bullet, let's go for growth budget? Is it going to be, that, okay, we will continue, we'll push for reforms, or is it likely to be that, okay, that there seems to be an unhappiness and let's do more on social programs?
I think what would be there is, one, a huge stress on agriculture. You will see a massive increase in allocations of public irrigation systems. You will see some other schemes being announced for, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Vikas, Sinchai Vikas Yojana, etc. And then that'll be one thing. The second thing that you might see, and which will be wonderful if it happens, is the dismantling of the fertilizer subsidy regime. The decarnalization of it, and also this whole, it could be that you get the fertilizer subsidy as direct bank transfer to the small and marginal farmer. Because under the name of the small and marginal farmer, everybody else has been benefiting rather than the small and marginal farmer. Either it could be that DBT using jam, or it would be 5 to 10 bags being given sort of at a subsidized level, and after that everybody else buys it at the market price. So the agriculture would have public irrigation, jam, and also I think something about improving water availability and so on. So that's, I think, because Mr. Modi has done that in Gujarat quite successfully, and he must know that all those chief ministers who have been elected thrice are those where agriculture has prospered.
I think that we're seeing the substitution of substantial programs for the disadvantaged with announcements and a lot of, there's a lot of hype, for instance, around the Atal Pension Yojana. When you actually got down to the basics of it, it was appalling, because what you're really saying is that you're going to have, for the majority of the poor, a pension scheme based entirely on contributions from the poorest, with no matching contributions of public as well as the employers. So what would I like to see? I mean, there's a lot, but I'll just talk about, I think, 3 basic things. The first, I think, is addressing the crisis in agriculture. A farmer's income protection program based on the amount of land that you have, with a top-up, in fact, on land size, would be equitable and would, I think, is the one thing that would save Indian agriculture. The second would be to greatly expand the tax base that we have. I think India's tax to GDP ratios are among the lowest in the world. And I was just getting some figures here. In India, tax is about 16% now. Even revenues totally is about 20%. China is 28, Brazil 36. Even the US is 31, France is 53, and so on. I think we need to tax more, and we need to tax more from direct taxes, corporate taxes, inheritance taxes, rather than taxes, indirect taxes.
What are your expectations, especially since you're the tax man? So,
India is a very high taxed country. It's not a low tax country. If you look at the impact of corporate tax rate, dividend distribution tax, it also has a very inefficient tax administration, which pushes up cost of compliances to businesses, and hence it is imperative for the for the government to bring down the tax rates. You have a challenge on personal taxes. We have less than 3 crores people paying personal taxes.
3.24 give
That's right.
2 lakh crores, and they should be at least about 3 times.
That's right. So if you add that, you will get to the OECD tax to GDP ratio. So I think we need to have more investment in technology to be able to track down who are the hidden taxpayers.
Commissioners, no, man.
Right. You need to have a efficient system for training of departmental officers. You need to fundamentally change the entire architect of Department of Revenue. Today, the Department of Revenue architect is that the same taxman collects taxes, he is the adjudicator, and he also formulates tax policy. Yeah. I think there is a fundamental conflict of interest that is there within the Department of Revenue, until and unless in this country you're going to separate the tax policy formulation from the person who's going to tax, and separate it further from the person who's going to adjudicate, you're not going to have a sensible tax system.
If the global situation worsens and China, nobody knows that whether China will become much worse, what will be the effect on India, and what will it do?
The fact is that there is enough pent-up potential demand effect, which can be converted to effective demand in this country for a large part of our things, and the fact that our merchandise goods exports constitute 1.3% of global trade. So there is a huge scope there for increasing that share, market share. So it's not necessary that we should be a boat that only rises with the tide and falls with the tide. We can also actually go deeper, when the tide is down, and increase our market share.
I do think, of course, there will be impacts, but I think if we have a problem with economic growth, it's primarily going to be due to domestic policy problems. We can differ about what those domestic policy changes, what you call reforms may be different from what I call reforms. But unless we reform internally, if we reform internally, we are robust enough to be able to withstand global changes.
What was the same?
Well, I think on the international economy, yes, we are more integrated than we were in the past. At the moment, we're still less integrated than most other economies. So, I mean, that's the real situation. We are going to be less susceptible than most other economies to international ups and downs. International ups will be better for us than international downs. But I think the main thing to realize is that it's not these huge ups and downs which we should be bothered about. What we should be bothered about is that from what it looks like, take it for the next 10 years, we're going to have a slow-growing world economy. And we've got to actually design our own economy to fit that reality.